Welcome to the Theta Oilfield Services Rod Pumping Optimization video podcast. This is John Svinos. Okay, so let's talk about the setup option of RODSTAR-D, which is the fourth icon from the left on the toolbar. You know, the setup option is very useful. The very first time you install the program, you can go in there and set your system of units, how to show the output window and so forth, batch mode options. And once you set the program up, you don't have to go there every time you run it, unless there is something to change. But normally that's not the purpose of setup. Setup allows you to put in certain variables that don't change, certain options that don't change very often, and only go there if you need to. Now let's discuss what options are available under setup. The first one is general. Under general, we have system of units, which allows you to change from English, which is the default units, to Canadian or metric. And also preferences for showing the visual input window, and also saving XIAC imported dyno cards in RODSTAR files. These are by default on. Now let's discuss in a little more detail the system of units. When you select something other than English units, let's say for example you select Canadian units, which is basically a mix of English and metric units. One of the things that changes under preferences when you do that is the option to display sinker bars in feet. The reason why we have that on by default is, even though you might be in Canadian units and the rostering is normally in meters, since sinker bars typically are sold in feet, you can display them in feet if you like. So that allows you a little more flexibility in the way you see things on the different input windows. So now once you select your system of units and then click OK to get out of the setup window, you can see now, because we selected Canadian units, that the pump depth is in meters. The polish rod diameter shows both inches and millimeters. And if I was to go to the rostering window, you'll see the same thing there. You can see that the rods are shown both in millimeters and inches. Okay, now another thing that I wanted to discuss is you can switch back and forth between metric and English units, no matter what units you have selected in setup, by simply pressing F2. For example, if I am in the pump depth field and press F2, that switches to feet, and to indicate that we are in the opposite units that as compared to what we selected in setup, the field here becomes green. Now if I leave this field and click in the next field, it'll go back to its original unit, which is meters. So that is how that works. Another thing that I can do is, if I'm entering data from scratch the first time, and let's say I don't have the pump depth in meters, but I have it in feet, I can press F2 before I start typing in data, and that will switch me to feet, and then I can start typing in my distance, my depth in feet, and again, as soon as I click outside of that field, it'll go back to meters. So that's how that works. The same thing for entering a target production. I can either type it in cubic meters per day in this case, let's say 50 cubic meters a day, or if I know it in barrels, all I do is I press F2 before start typing into this field. That switches me to barrels a day. So now let's say my target is 300 barrels a day. Then as soon as I click outside this field, or if I press F2 again, it'll switch back to cubic meters a day. So it's very convenient for any field that has units to be able to switch back and forth, if you like, between English and metric units by pressing the F2 key. Alright, now let's go back to the setup. let me go back to English units here. So that's the first option. The second option here is batch mode. Now this is the option where you can go in to customize the spreadsheet that the program will come up with when it runs in batch, and also to specify the options here on the top of what you want the program to do when it runs in batch. Now batch run means that you can set up the program to run a number of cases unattended automatically. So when you go into that option, there are some things that are checked by default, like create spreadsheet file. What that does is when you run these cases in batch mode, then they will automatically be sorted, or I'm sorry, not sorted, but summarized. The results of the runs will be summarized in an Excel spreadsheet. If you want to see this directly in Excel after it's done, then you can select that option and the program will automatically load those cases for you into Excel. If you don't want the program to rerun cases that have output already saved, then you can select that option. But in some cases, if you get a new version of the program that has some bug fixes, then you might want to take that off, and then the program will rerun the cases again. If a file has custom information, for example, if somebody creates a file with a custom rod string, a rod string rate, in other words, that is not in the program, then what do you want the program to do when this file is included in the batch? Well, there are two options. One is to update the file with the information from your setup, if you have the same custom rods, or to update the setup with the file's information. So that allows you to control what happens in that situation. Now, here under spreadsheet setup, you can actually customize the spreadsheet that the program creates to show exactly what you want. To do that, you need to create a new format. You do that by clicking on the Add button here. The program starts with the default spreadsheet, which actually shows most common values that people want to look at when they're comparing designs, like the production, system efficiency, electricity cost per barrel, pumping unit manufacturer, and so forth. So these items here on the left side of this window will be the columns that you will get in the summary spreadsheet. These items on the right are additional things you can add to the spreadsheet if you like. For example, if you want to add crank rotation to your spreadsheet, all you need to do is click and drag that item to the other side, and then you can put it anywhere you want. For example, let's say I want to put under pumping unit designation. Oh, I actually by mistake put it before pumping unit designation, but that's okay, because all you have to do is highlight the item and then click move down here, and then you can put it anywhere you want, or move up. See how easy that is to do. So you can put them in any order you want. The same thing for any other item that you see here. It contains both input and outputs. You can put them anywhere you want, in any order you want, in the spreadsheet that you will generate. Another option here is to include the raw string in the spreadsheet, but since the raw string is really not a single item, but several items grouped together under one, if you include the spreadsheet, that will make the spreadsheet, if you include the raw string in the spreadsheet, it'll make the spreadsheet very long, very large, and it may not be easy to work with it. So by default, it's not, this is not included. But anyway, once you customize your columns any way you want, by either adding items to them or taking items away the same way, you know, like for example, you can take the crank rotation back to the other side if you don't want to include it, by clicking and dragging and dropping it in the window on the right, and it will automatically go in the right place alphabetically. I'm going to go back and put this back here actually. I want to keep it in this spreadsheet. But anyway, the point is you can design your spreadsheet by clicking and dragging any way you want. You can add more columns, take columns away, change the order of the columns, and then you can give it a name. So I'm going to call this JGS1, and then you click OK, and the program now remembers that format from now on, and all you need to do to access this format is highlight it before you start your batch, and the program will use that format. So all you have to do is click on it one time, and that highlights it. Now, there are actually two ways to run batch. One is the manually started batch that you can do at any time, which I'm going to show you how you do next. Another way to do batch is by programming the software to wake up at a specific time. To do that, you select here when you want the program to wake up. For example, here I have it set up to wake up at 3 p.m. But of course you can change that to be anything you want. You know, you can make it 3:05, 3:10 or whatever p.m. And then here you specify the directory where the RODSTAR files are that you want to run in batch, and then the directory that you want the program to put in the spreadsheet file that it creates when it runs. This is a useful option for running a large number of files without even you having to be there to do it. You can have, let's say, 100 cases in a directory, this directory here, and then you can program the software to wake up when you're at lunch or after you go home, and it will automatically run all the cases in that directory and summarize them in a spreadsheet. Now, let me show you how you start the manual batch. Once you make those settings changes, you know, the setup changes, and you get out of setup, then basically what you do to create the files that you want to run is basically enter data and save cases like you normally do. Okay, so for example, you know, you can save the same file over and over again with different pumping units. So if you want to evaluate the effect of the pumping unit on the results, all you have to do is go to the pumping unit window, select a pumping unit, let's say a Lufkin conventional, then you go to File, Save As, and save it as, you know, this name. Then once you save that file, then you come back to this window and you select a different unit type, let's say a Lufkin Mark II. So then you can, again, you go to File, Save As, and then you give it a different file name at the end, and so on until you have all the files that you want to compare in the spreadsheet. And there is no limit what you can do. I mean, basically you can save any combination of conditions, any pumping unit, any pump size, any stroke length, any whatever. And then once you have the files that you want to run in batch, all you need to do to start the batch process is to select Open File, and then you locate the files that you're going to run, you know, and let's say these are the files I'm going to run in batch. And what you do is you click on the first file, you to highlight it in Windows, and then you hold down the Shift key and click on the last file. That selects the group of files you want as a group, just like you do in Windows. As a matter of fact, you can also select a file that is outside the group by holding down the Control key and clicking on a file outside the group. That will also select it as part of the group that will run in batch. So once you are done selecting the files that you want to run in batch, you click Open, and the fact that you selected more than one file tells the program that you want to run in batch. So it will automatically start the batch process. Okay, so here we see the same options we saw in setup. The make printouts is unchecked because normally you don't want to make printouts of every case you run. the create spreadsheet is selected and the view spreadsheet in Excel is selected also. And also remember that I had unchecked this option in setup, don't rerun cases with saved output. I only want to include this if I've run the same cases in, let's say, more than one batch file, because that way I can save some time by not having to rerun the calculations to build a new spreadsheet. So by selecting this option, actually I can turn this option on now. By selecting this option, you save time because the program doesn't have to rerun a case that has already been run and saved. Because a case that was run and saved has the calculations already saved in the file, and all the program has to do is extract those numbers and build a spreadsheet. It doesn't actually have to recalculate all the results. So that's what this is for. And of course, like I said earlier, if you have a new version that has some bug fixes, in which case you want to rerun the calculations, then you can uncheck that option and it will go a little bit slower, but it'll be the results will be more accurate. So anyway, once you select these options, you click on proceed. Now the program will ask for the name of the batch Excel spreadsheet that you want to create. The default name is RST batch. You can also go to any directory you want to save this. For example, let's say I want to go to my seed directory under the Theta file directory, and I want to call this one, well, I can leave it as it is, rstbatch.xls. So I click on save, and now the program starts the batch process. It shows me how many files I selected, how many files have completed running, and the overall percent completion. As you can see, the first file has been completed. This is what we call the batch run log window. This shows you a record of all the cases you run in batch, and any either warnings or recommendations the program might normally show on the screen, it will show them here. For example, here in the first case it says the NIMD motor size you specified is slightly smaller than RODSTAR's minimum recommended size. Typically you see that on the screen when you run the program, but to avoid stopping the batch process from completing, or stopping on the first case waiting for you, we simply print that on this log and we continue anyway. So far the program has completed 3 out of the 11 files and it's 27% done. So it will continue to do this until all the files have been run, and then it will show us the spreadsheet. So I'm going to come back here when most of the cases are done. Okay, so 9 out of the 11 cases have run so far, and this is the list of the cases that the program executed while in batch. Keep in mind that you can also print this log. When the batch process is completed, you can print this if you want, including all the warnings and messages that you see here. And also, of course, you can print the spreadsheet that the program will create when it's done with this process. That way you have a record of all the cases that have been run in batch. Okay, so now it's completing the last case, and now all the cases have been run, and look what we see here, right? Waiting for us in the background is the Excel spreadsheet that the program created, summarizing all the runs with the file name, and all the other items we selected: production, system efficiency, electricity cost, pumping unit type, and so forth. So once you have all the results in the spreadsheet, it's much easier to compare these runs as compared to having several pieces of paper of the different printouts on your desk. You can sort the spreadsheet by efficiency, by production, by anything you want. So this is how batch works. So I'm going to go ahead and close this spreadsheet now, and what I want to show you is that here, now that we are done running this batch, you can click on print, and that will print this window here. Now also, you can go to any of these cases that the program finished running and look at the results. For example, if I wanted to look at the results of this case right here, I double click on the blue bar with the name of the case, and the program will load the results for that case and display them for me. Okay, so these are the results of this case. Now I can go back to the batch run log by closing this window, and I'm back here. And now I can do the same thing for any other case. I double click on the blue bar that has the name of the file, and it'll take me right to the output for that file. Okay, so that's how batch works. Now what about the automatic batch? Well, again, that's very simple. Since we already specified under batch mode what directory we want the program to look at and load files from, and what time we want the program to start this process, and also what directory we want the program to put in the spreadsheet that it will create when it's done, then all we have to do really is put the program to sleep by clicking on this icon here on the toolbar. That's the automatic batch icon. When we do that, the program will tell us that when it wakes up, this is what it's going to do when it starts to run in batch. It will create a spreadsheet, it will view the results in Excel, and it's not going to rerun the cases that have saved output. So if that's what I want, then I click on proceed, and now the program says the program will scan for and process files Monday, August 9 at this time, 3:10 p.m. To cancel the automatic batch mode, double click on the icon on the bottom of the screen. And if I click OK, then this program will be minimized now, and it will wait for me to actually will wait until 3:10 p.m. and then it will automatically launch and run all the cases. But if I want to stop this process, all I have to do is click on the icon on the bottom of the screen. Now the program says, do you want to cancel the automatic batch mode? I say yes to that, and the program is back to normal mode. All right, now let's go back to setup, and let's talk about the third item that we see listed here, which is the cost database. Now the cost database allows you to put in cost for your rod string and for your pumping units. For example, if you wanted to add a cost for the pumping units, you select the first item here, pumping unit costs, and then you select the manufacturer that you want to put in cost for. So let's say American Producer California, and then you come in here and you put in the cost for each pumping unit. For example, here let's say this is $20,000. Oops, a few extra zeros there. 20,000. So let's say this one is also 20,000. You get the idea. You can just type in the cost next to each pumping unit. You can do the same thing for the rod string. You can select the type of rods you would like to put cost in for. Let's say I want to put in cost for grade D API rods. Then you go over here and you put in how much you pay per foot for the different diameters that you use. You don't have to put in any cost for diameters that you don't use. So if you don't use 1 1/8 diameter, then you don't need to put in the cost. If you use 1 inch, let's say it's $5 a rod, so you put in 5. You go to the 7/8, let's say it's $4.75 per foot. You put that in. 3/4, let's say it's $4.25, and so on. I'm just making these numbers up. I don't think that they're not real, of course. So once you put that cost information in, then and you click OK, then when you have the program design the rostering for you, it will also show you the cost. But to see the cost, under output options, you need to include the cost analysis page, as you can see here, and that will include the cost analysis page with that information. Otherwise, you will not see that page. So that's what the cost analysis page does. Okay, so let's go back to cost database here. So here again you can select rostering cost or pump unit cost. Under rostering cost, you can select a specific type of manufacturer. For example, you can select fiberglass, and then you can put in for fiber rods, for example, or fiber rods continuous composite. Or you can go back to, let's say, single bars and put in cost information for different types of single bars that we have in here. That way you can get a more accurate summary of the cost for the equipment. The next item I want to discuss is defaults. Defaults is a very useful item because it allows you to basically customize the software for your operation, and by doing that you can save about half of the time that it takes to enter data for a new case. For example, you can put in your company name, you can put in your compressibility index for group 2 wells, you can put in electricity cost in dollars per kilowatt hour, you can select the folder that you normally use to open or save files. You can, there is a whole bunch of different options. You can include, you can select your favorite IPR correlation, the motor type that is most common, the most common pumping unit type, oil gravity for your oil, the most common plunger size you have, and so on. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can see what I'm talking about. Also, for those of you that want to use the more sophisticated, more extensive cover page option, this is primarily for a service company that wants to have that page showing up on the results. You can put in your company name, your contact name, telephone number, and so forth here, and the program will automatically keep that information and show them on that page. You can put in your standard cycle rod length. Those of you that use 30-foot rods as your standard length, you can put those in there, and the program will automatically design rods that are equally divisible by that number. You can put in your service factor. You can put in your most common stuffing box friction, tubing pressure, tubing size, username. All the items that you normally have to type into the program can be customized. Water cut. Let's say my my water cut is 90% in the field that I work at. I put it here. Every time I start a new case, the program will automatically default to that. The same thing for the water specific gravity. Let's say my water specific gravity is 1.01 by that's my field's water specific gravity. Next time I start a case, it will default to that, so it'll save me time. Below this list, we have something called limits. Now, this is kind of interesting because you have two items here: maximum desirable steel rod loading and maximum desirable fiberglass rod loading. Now, what are these numbers? Well, when you ask the program to design a rostering for you, it will actually look at this number to decide when to go to the next diameter in the rostering. So if you ask the program to design a rostering that has a maximum of 1 inch and a minimum of 3/4, what the program will do is internally, of course, you don't see this, but it will first try to use all 3/4 inch rods. If the loading on those rods is more than this number shows, like more than 95% in this case, then the program will go to a 2-taper design, 7/8 and 3/4. It will balance the design for those. In other words, it will select the appropriate length to give you the same stress loading. But then if the loading for both of those sections exceeds this number here in this window, in this field, then it will go to the next diameter. So it'll use 1 inch, 7/8, and 3/4, and so on. So that's how you can control, how the program jumps to the next diameter. If I put 90% in here, then the program will jump to the next diameter when the loading is at 90%. So that gives you an average loading for the rostering that is lower than than it would otherwise be if you were to leave it at 95%. A similar thing happens with fiberglass rods when you put this number in here. The program will use the smallest diameter rod that is not overloaded, but of course with fiberglass rods there might be some other reasons that the program might go to a larger diameter rod. So it works a little bit differently for fiberglass as it does for steel rods. Here, this option allows you to force the program to use all the diameters that you specify in the rostering. So if you selected 1 inch maximum and 3/4 minimum, if you click this option on, then no matter what the loading on the rods is, the program will use an 86 design. It'll use all the diameters that you specify. Otherwise, if that option is not selected, the program will use whatever diameters is appropriate to avoid being overloaded. You might select 1 inch as the maximum, 3/4 as the minimum. The program for a shallow well might use all 3/4 inch rods because the loading is going to be less than 95% here. Or it might use 7/8 and 3/4, but it may not need to use the 1 inch. Okay, so this section here, side load per rod, allows you to specify what rods you would like to use for the deviated program, and also what is the rating of side load per rod. So for example, here I have selected use molded guides, and I told the program that to use 40 pounds per guide. So if the program calculates a side load of 80 pounds, then it will recommend that I need 2 rod guides for that rod. And of course you can use any other kind of rod, any other kind of rod guide you want, and based on that selection you can put in your side load, or it might already maybe built in by the manufacturer. For example, if I select an RGI Tornado, I don't have to specify the side load. The program knows what the side load is for that rod. Or I can select other. There might be some rod that is new, is not on the market yet. Let's call this I don't know, X guide or something. A new high-tech rod guide that came on the market, and let's say it's rated for 60 pounds per guide, 60 pounds of side load. So I can put that in. The program also allows you to put in the maximum number of rod guides according to the manufacturer, and the minimum number of rod guides and the maximum number of rod guides, because of course there is a limit to how many guides you can put on a rod. So the program will tell you if there is a problem with that. If it calculates more guides than is the maximum, that tells you have excessive side load and maybe this well cannot be successfully rod pumped. So that's how that works. I'm going to go back to my molded guides that I had here before, and so that's how this works. Another option here is the output options, which we already briefly talked about before. It allows you to design your output report, and every time you make a selection here, it updates the miniature icons of each page you're going to get on the output. If you don't want to see a cover page, you can take that off. As you can see, it takes that page off. If you don't want to see the cost database, you can uncheck that. That takes that page away. If you don't want to see the recommended rod guides, you can uncheck that. That goes away. Obviously, you probably want to leave that on for deviated wells. If you don't want to see the measure deviation survey because you already put it in with a spreadsheet, you know what it is, you can uncheck that. That takes that page away. So it allows you to visually design how many pages you're going to see maximum on the output. Under pumping unit options, you see there is a little plus symbol next to pumping unit options. That means there is more than one item there. So when I click on the little plus symbol, I see there are 2 sub items under pumping unit options: customized pumping unit list and measured pumping unit list. If you select the customized pumping unit list, then you can actually customize what programs the software, what pumping units the program will show you, and that way you can more quickly find the unit you're looking for. For example, let's say I go to American Conventional. On the right side here, I see all the units that are made by this manufacturer. But in the field that I'm in, maybe I only have a few of these sizes. For example, let's say I have this size right here. So I click and drag it from the right to the left. Let's say I have this one right here. Let me go down in this list. Let's say I have this one. And this one. That's all the units that I have from this manufacturer. By doing this here, you're telling the program two things. I have American conventional units in my field, and I only have these 4 sizes available. So when you click OK, then the program customizes. It knows that these are the only units you have from that manufacturer. Now there is another way to update this list, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But the other option under here for pumping units is measured pumping unit list. This option allows you to put in pumping units that are not in our database. So if you have a unit that is not in our database, basically you have 2 options. One is you can pick a unit from the existing list that is close to the unit you have, or you can get the dimensions of the unit that we don't have, either from the manufacturer, or you can measure them yourself, and then you can put them in here yourself. So for example, to access one of these units that I've already put in, I simply click on one of these units and I select the edit button. If you want to add a new unit, you would click on the plus. You'll get the same window. The difference is, in this case, the data is already there because I entered it before. But this is a very powerful window that allows you to put in the manufacturer, the pumping unit name, any other information you want to put in to help you identify the pumping unit type, and as you can see, we support all types of available pumping units. Required direction of rotation, if there is one. In this case, this is a conventional unit, so it can go both clockwise or counterclockwise, so the required crank direction of rotation is none. Here you put in your gearbox rating, structural rating, maximum stroke length, and articulating moment of inertia. Here we have the R dimensions. There are 3 R dimensions here, which is the radii of the crank for each of the stroke lengths. Here we have the A, C, I, K, and P dimensions. And if you have any questions about these dimensions, all you have to do is click in the field for the dimension and then press F1, and the program will show you context sensitive help for that item. So it's very easy to find out exactly what we're looking for this window. Once you put your data in, make sure that the calculated stroke lengths here agree with what the manufacturer says you should have for the different crank radii or stroke length selection. So if that's not the case, maybe one of the dimensions is incorrect, and you might want to double check with the manufacturer. Structural imbalance, again, if you're in that field, you press F1, the program will give you help on what that is if you forgot. The same thing for the crank offset angle. If you press F1, the program will show you what we're looking for. For conventional units, that's usually 0. And by the way, if you don't know what the articulating inertia is for a unit, you can either estimate it from an existing unit that you may already have, or leave that 0. That doesn't make a big difference really. So the more important thing is to put in the data for the dimensions, the A, C, I, K, and P. These are the most important dimensions for being able to simulate the pumping unit. All right. Okay, so I'm going to get out of here for a second because I want to show you another way of customizing the pumping unit list. Once you go to the pumping unit window and you select the unit, let's say we select this unit here that we actually have in this existing well, but let's say I want to add that unit to my custom list. It's very simple to do. Select this option here, use custom unit list, And this option, this button actually has a dual function. If you click on it and the unit that you have selected is not in your custom list, then it will ask you, do you want to add this unit to the custom list? And if you say yes, then it will add the unit to the list, plus it will show you the custom list. So it will automatically switch to the custom list. So if you look down here on the list of manufacturers, you only see a few manufacturers because these are all the units that I have in the field, let's say, right? Now you might say, well, what happened to the big list? How can I go back to my big list of units? Well, it's very simple to do. All you need to do is uncheck this option here, and now you're back to the big list, as you can see here. See, we're back in the big list. So that's how simple it is to do. And since this is actually easier to do than the setup option, you can actually build your custom list of units as you're running the program. Every time you pick a unit, you select here this option and the program will put it in your custom list, and after a while all the units that you have will be in the custom list. Now if you put in custom pumping unit, measured pumping units in the program, the way you access them is you go here to the very top of the manufacturer's list, and the very first item is measured pumping units. So if you click on measured pumping units, you will see the pumping units that you saw in setup when I was talking about entering your own dimensions. And then it's as easy to select one as it is for the units that are built into the program. Alright, so let's go back to setup to talk about the last item that we haven't discussed, and that is the custom rod grades option. This option allows you to put in your own customized high grade rods, or actually any kind of rod that we may not have in our list. And if you have a rod already that, let's say, you put in from before that we later added to the program, you can actually delete it very easily by clicking on this button right here. Boom, and it's gone. If you're going to add a new rod, you click on the plus symbol. The program will ask you for the rod grade or manufacturer's name. So for example, let's say as an example, Norris came up with a new rod, and we're going to call this the NZ1. That's the name of the rod, and it's made by Norris. So I'm going to call it Norris. I'm going to go this way, Norris NZ1. Okay, and let's say that the minimum tensile strength, let's say this is a ultra high strength rod, and the minimum tensile strength is 155,000 psi. You put that in, and also you select what is the method of stress analysis that the manufacturer recommends. So let's say they recommend the same method of stress analysis as the Norris 97, which is the modified Goodman with T over 2.8. So you select that option, and if this is a single bar instead of a regular rod, you can click here. Otherwise, you leave that unchecked, and that tells the program this is a rod, not a single bar. So when you click OK, this rod now shows under your custom rods. And once you put it in and you exit setup, it's actually very easy to use that rod. All you have to do is go to the rostering window, and for the rod grade, let's say I want to change this rod grade to the one we put in. Oh, there it is, Norris NZ1. See that? And it's on the bottom of the regular rod section in the program. So here it is, and the program, uses it just like any other rod. So this is good if you want to do some research on new rods that might be under development and so forth. So that concludes the setup. Keep in mind that every time you go in setup and make a change, that can affect the results significantly, especially the changes that have to do with calculations. For example, under defaults, if you select the option to use all diameters in the rod string, that's going to have a big effect on your recommended rod string, so please make sure that you know what you have selected here. And the same thing for the max and minimum desirable maximum rod loading for steel and fiberglass rods. So just be alert so that you know what you put in here and how that affects your results. And that's the end of this section. Thank you for your attention.